this video, I'm going to photograph an iconic building in New York City at JFK Airport, and I'll show you how I process one of the images in Photoshop. In a very unglamorous location. I'm in a parking garage at JFK Airport in New York City. I'm not here to shoot the parking garage. I am here to shoot a terminal. It is the TWA Terminal, designed by Saarinen, I think in the early 1960s. It's a fantastic building that I've shot before. Here's some video of me shooting it the last time. And I'm on the parking garage because I get a nice view of the terminal from here. We set up and see what kind of shots I can get. So my plan is to get some shots from up here and then go down on the ground and get some shots from there. The sun is supposed to rise sort of in back of the building, but there's not much of a sunrise this morning anyway because of the cloud cover, which is probably good. It would be tough to handle that dynamic range, but it is such a cool building. So the last time I was here, this building was still under some construction, so it was really messy. And to clean it up in Photoshop was a challenge. Now the only issue is you've got a bunch of these cars in front. I think those would be easier to deal with. I really just want to focus on this structure itself, which I think is just spectacular. I am going to head down to street level and try to get some shots from there, maybe get some details of the building itself. The elevator's on the other side of the parking garage, so I'm just going to take the stairs. Only 5 flights up, so not too bad. Get a little exercise this morning. I am just making my way around this building. By the way, it's a hotel now. It's no longer a terminal. Very hip, cool hotel. And you know, you don't see it from the back much or the side, so I'm just walking around, see if I can find an interesting composition to shoot. I didn't do much vlogging after this, so the rest of the video is really just B-roll and photos, but it gives you a great sense of what this building is all about. It's fantastic. Alright, I'm back up in the parking garage. I am gonna head home. Hey, if you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of this content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you are a Photoshop junkie, stick around. I'll show you how I process one of these images in Photoshop. Well, what a cool morning. I love this building and I really liked photographing it from both the outside and the inside. This is a shot that I took, one of the shots I took from the parking garage looking down on the building. I'm in Photoshop now, and what I want to do is show you how I turned this image into this image here. Now, I've done a little bit of work in Lightroom already. I converted to black and white. I think I brought up the shadows a little bit, pulled down the highlights, maybe added a little bit of clarity, but frankly didn't do too much. I love this building, but this image I have some problems with. One, for me, there's way too many distractions. Those cars in front I find really distracting, and even the tracks in front. Also, this was before sunrise. It was very cloudy. The light was really flat. And so it doesn't have much drama or much punch to it, and I really want to add that. So those are the things that I'm really trying to achieve. I have already made a number of selections, really different parts of the building. I didn't even use all those selections. And honestly, I wanted to do this relatively quickly, so I didn't want to spend 7 hours on this image. I thought I could achieve what I wanted to relatively quickly. So again, I made those selections, I saved them. To make those selections, I mostly use the polygonal lasso tool, which is right here. I basically kind of zoomed in and just outlined the different selections, and I save them by making the selection. You go up to select, and then it's grayed out now, but save selection, and you think of a name for it. And so I'm going to use those different selections relatively quickly to show you how I achieved what I did. The first thing, though, that I wanted to do was remove the distractions of the cars and the tracks in front. And there's different ways you could do it. I just went a really quick route and said, hey, let's darken it. And so I went to an exposure adjustment layer. I pulled down the exposure, to make it, pretty dark. So now everything is dark. What I want to do is invert this mask. So if I click on the mask, on a Mac, I hit Command-I, I invert the mask. So it's not showing, the adjustment that I made. But then I want to pull up my gradient tool. I want to make sure it's linear gradient. Make sure the foreground is white, because that will then show you what I've done. And I can just pull up from the bottom, and you're going to see it's going to darken things. And you can play with it to get the exact location of the darkness or where you want it to break in. But something like that. It doesn't have to be quite that dark, so I can make it a little bit lighter. But you can see already, right? Here's the before, here's the after. All of a sudden your eye is really drawn to the actual structure itself, and the distractions of the cars fade quite a bit. So next thing I'm going to do is work on parts of the building, and I want to maybe brighten it up a little bit so it pops, but maybe more importantly, highlight the curvature of those pieces of the top of the structure. And so I am going to first make a selection or load a selection. So I'll start with the bit on the left, the top of it. You could see where those marching ants are, the selection that I made. And I want to use a curves adjustment layer. What I want to do is first brighten up the whole selection. And so I'm going to pull up on this line. You can see the whole selection is getting bright. I then want to reselect. You can hit select and then reselect. I'm going to use my gradient tool. This time, however, I want to use the reflected gradient tool. I want my foreground to be white, which it is. And what I want to do is to highlight the curvature. If I pull somewhere in the middle and pull down, what's going to happen is that bit in the middle will become brighter with a nice gradient to it. So here's the before, here's the after. And by doing that, it does highlight the curvature of the building. To accentuate that a little bit more, I can kind of darken the edges of it. And simply I've got the selection already made. So I can go to Adjustments, Curves Adjustment Layer. This time I'll pull down. And again, that's going to darken the entire selection. But then I can reselect, go to my gradient tool. I'm going to use the reflected gradient tool. This time I want the foreground color to be black because that middle bit I want to kind of show through. And so once again, I'm just going to kind of pull down in the middle somewhere. And again, I'm not going to go too crazy here with trial and error, but I'm going to deselect by hitting Command D. And so you can get a sense of what I achieved, right? Here's the before, fairly flat. Here's the after, much more dramatic. And it does highlight the curvature of that section. In fact, you can just look at the left side versus the right side and how different they are. Let's do the right side now. So I'm going to go to Load Selection. I think I call it right top. Hit OK. So I've made my selection, and it's, same thing. I'm going to go to a Curves Adjustment Layer. I'm going to pull up, which will brighten the whole selection. I'll reselect. I've got my gradient tool. I want that foreground to be white. I got my reflected gradient tool. And again, I'm going to pull down from the middle, and you get that nice brightness in the middle. And once again, I'll do another Curves Adjustment Layer. I'm going to pull down this time to darken everything. I will reselect. I'm going to make the foreground color black. And again, pull down from the middle. And you start to see that. Again, the two sides aren't quite identical. But if I make this maybe a little bit darker, they start to look more similar. I'm going to deselect by hitting Command D. And then lastly, just this middle section. So I'm going to Load Selection. I will call it middle top, or I called it middle top. So I've got my selection made. Once again, a Curves Adjustment Layer, pull up to brighten the selection. I'm going to reselect it, go to my gradient tool, make my foreground color white. And to do that, by the way, there's this little thing like two arrows. You can just toggle back and forth. So again, I can kind of pull over from the left, and I've got this nice brightness that comes down the middle of it. And then to highlight that more, I've got the selection made. I can go to a Curves Adjustment Layer, pull down this time. I can reselect, got my gradient tool, foreground color black. I'm going really fast, but this is kind of how I did it. Pull over from the middle, and that gives you a sense. I'll deselect. And so, this all took me about probably 5 minutes, right? But here's the before, and here's the after. I do want to darken the sky a little bit. Again, it will highlight the building more. So I'm just going to go to an exposure adjustment layer, and this is darken the entire image. I'm going to invert the mask by clicking on the mask, hitting Command I. I'm going to go to my gradient tool, make sure the foreground color is white, linear gradient tool, and just pull down. By the way, to make sure it's straight, if you hold the Shift key down, you will get a straight vertical line as you pull down. And so it gives you a sense of what I've achieved. Again, this just took me about 5 minutes. I did some other things on the building, brightening up some of these overhangs in the lower part of it. But, you get a sense. Here was, this was the final image. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, please put them down below. If you like this content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. and always give me a thumbs up. That helps the channel as well. Until next time.